What's good, everybody? Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Over Quota. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review if you haven't already. And like always, the J. David Group, which is my company, is sponsoring this podcast. We help founders and CEOs turn their startups into unicorns by introducing them to CROs and VPs of sales with track records of generating revenue, building teams, and scaling growth. This podcast is also, if you've been listening, is now being sponsored by Allego. For all you sales leaders out there, have you ever absolutely nailed a sales training or had a rep who killed a presentation that you wished you could have recorded to be seen later by new hires or other members of the team? Well, that's just one of the things that Allego can do. Not only does it allow you to record your best content for practice, collaboration, and feedback, but it gives you a way to organize all of your best content in one place so it's easily accessible to help improve sales performance for everyone. Email me, Webb, with 2 B's, at thejdavidgroup.com so I can personally introduce you to someone who will take great care of you. Now, my guest today is Jon Hawkins, who's the Chief Revenue Officer at Augmedix, which provides remote medical documentation and live clinical support so clinicians can focus less on desktop medicine and more on what matters most, patient care. Jonathan also co-founded a company that I want to ask him about a while back that just seemed like just an interesting story that I want to focus on, and he's gracious enough to talk about that as well. Jonathan, welcome to Over Quota.
Great to see you, Jay. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
So let's just start with what I just ended with. Tell me a little bit about that company that I just alluded to that you co-founded, because I'm curious to learn about that.
Yeah, you're going way back in time, so you're gonna test my memory a little bit, but that's fine. Happy to do it. So, yeah, gosh, my co-founder and I founded Benue back. This was around 2000, and I was actually relatively new to healthcare at the time. So now we're going on 20 years of being in healthcare, but it was a great opportunity. We actually co-founded and at the time New Enterprises Associates, which is a big venture firm, basically giving us some seed capital to try to come up with a business plan. So we actually started the business with a blank slate, and then we had a gentleman by the name of old healthcare, not old in age, but who well experienced in it, a guy named Alan Hoops, who was kind of instrumental and joined us as the chairman of the company. But what we were trying to really address was the alignment of not patients, but members within healthcare, kind of their health status and how insurance worked with it. So typically what happens in the worlds of insurance is that kind of everyone pays a similar rate, yet you may have people who are have chronic conditions and those kind of things who are much higher utilizers. And then you have healthy individuals who don't utilize healthcare. And what ends up happening is oftentimes insurance carriers, like anyone else, they try to game the system to a certain extent, right? They want to attract all the low risk. And so you don't align payments with actual risk of individuals. And over time, actually, things like Medicare and those kind of things have caught up and tried to address those things in terms of how they do payments today. But back in the early 2000s, we were trying to create something that really didn't exist, and it was a fun process.
Let me ask you this: why were you able to secure that seed capital? Like, what was it about your experience or history then that said, you know what, yeah, we want to invest in Jon Hawkins and his co-founder to build this?
Yeah, I think it was, then there's a lot of things. It was relationships and trust, those kind of things. And I think we had the balance, the team of us, the three of us had experience too of understanding it. I was less the healthcare person there, but had experience as an operator and then kind of surrounded with healthcare experience. But it was relationships and the trust and the belief too, that as we kind of framed it out, that there was a market opportunity there. And as in anything, it was kind of start small and then you get through different gates and it continues to expand as you kind of prove different things out.
Tell me about that. Like, tell me about some of the early assumptions that you made about the market and the go-to-market strategy and what you were going to be able to do to spend that money wisely.
Yeah. The first thing we identified, I guess, in looking at it is that there was segments of the market where for people, there wasn't choice in terms of choosing health plans and those kind of things for individuals. And there were certain types of payers that were locked out. So for example, you have in Kaiser, this is just in California, you have an organization like Kaiser, for example, right? A more unique system of delivery that ties together the payer and the provider on one side. They were, in essence, largely, if you look at their market share at the time, locked out of the lower end of the market. And it's because nobody wanted to, no other insurance carriers wanted to be alongside them in this market. Yet they didn't fit for everyone, but they offered a lower cost option to the market that the market couldn't get. And I think it was that we identified that there were these players out there that offered a great solution for the market. In essence, were locked out, and that's what we were trying to solve for.
So how did you go about then bringing on the Kaisers and so forth on board?
Yeah.
Like, what was your messaging or your process for reaching out and saying?
Yeah, that was probably the the very, very interesting. Me coming into healthcare, and that's, I was responsible for trying to build those relationships. The sales cycle in healthcare to these large organizations is extremely complex and long, and it did take quite a while. But at the end of the day, I think, and this has been kind of a tenet of everything I've done and even doing now at Augmedix, but is that if you can have a strong foundation in what you're selling and have it be really driven in data in terms of what you're delivering, that value proposition, you kind of let that speak for itself to a certain extent. When you're selling, right, is if you can help whoever you're talking to kind of come to their own conclusion about maybe the challenge that they have and how best to fix it, that gets you a long way. And then it's just being tenacious, and it's a process of developing those relationships and kind of moving through that sales cycle. And a lot of them are consensus driven. So it's a lot of conversations, getting to the right people. And then you really, another thing I'll add, because this might be of interest, most people probably know this, but in these big organizations, you have to find someone who's going to be your advocate internally to get things done. And that's, probably no surprise to most people out there. But at the end of the day, right, you're not walking the halls every day. You can't be part of every meeting where decisions are made. Somebody has to go to bat for you. So that is absolutely key in getting that person there ready to go to bat for you.
How long did it take you to, you mentioned a long sales process, but how long did it take you to actually find that advocate, to find that champion, and what were your assumptions? What were your assumptions about that?
Yeah, you're testing my memory again, because this was again, 20 years ago, a lot more than 20 years ago, we had started that company, but it took time. I mean, it was probably over a year in terms of not necessarily finding that person, but really feeling like you're entrenched in that sales cycle and making progress on it. It took time. Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll ask this question more broadly, so it won't test your memory as much. But
I'm too old. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're wearing down. But as a general practice, I guess, when you have those longer sales cycles, and you are making a set of assumptions, and how important advocacy is within a company, how do you decide, I guess, who to target initially in order to and decide, okay, this is going to be the person that's going to advocate for us. This is going to be the champion.
So I there's some obvious stuff. It needs to be someone who has some influence within the organization, right? But I think that's the obvious one. I think the profile of the individual actually is what matters most. Because there are individuals within companies, and everyone's different, right? Who are looking to maybe make a name for themselves, want to advance, those kind of things. They're looking for something that they can advocate for that is in their interest as well. So it becomes in your mutual interest, right, to push for something. Because if they believe in it, and if it's going to work, right, it becomes a win-win situation. So, I think you got to find somebody who's motivated and, again, has ambitions, right, internally to try to get things done. And that's not everyone. There's different types of people in every organization, right? And you have to find that person who's going to be willing to go to bat.
And Going back to the go-to-market strategy for a second, was it direct? Was it a direct sell? Did you have partners? How did you build out the
Well, so that was again like one of the big lessons for me in terms of business. We created, I think, something that was really cool. It was a little bit ahead of its time. So in essence, it was a healthcare exchange. We signed up these big payers. We had like Kaiser and United Healthcare and Cigna and different organizations were part of it, different parts of the country. But that was really the first sale, was simply establishing these exchange. And that in itself was very, very challenging. Then you got to the process of then selling it into the market so people would buy it. Right. And then that market is very much controlled by insurance brokers who are selling to these employers. So that began a whole new sales cycle of how do you figure out how to distribute and sell this thing and get people to sign up. And I think for me, there's a lot of complexity there, and difficult to get alignment in terms of really pushing it. In that market, we have people selling insurance to employers, right? They're making money on commission. There's certain types that are willing to try innovative new products. It's not everyone. So that introduces complexity and challenges. If I'm, starting another business or working in areas, is really understanding that distribution and channels to sell. We had too many hoops to jump through in terms of that sales process. So we got through this first really long one, and then it was like, we're at the starting line. Right. So that was challenging.
So it sounds like you were direct, you were through partnerships, you were through, I guess, channel relationships, you were just trying to figure. And at the end of it, where did most of the revenue, like if you had that pie chart, where was most of the revenue coming in through?
Yeah, so it was a combination. We got the payers to buy into it, so we had chunks of revenue from them. Mm-hmm. But where it was going to get big was then as it was actually delivering through the brokers and those things, and the employers paying and then the payback on that. Mm-hmm. And so it was a combination of both of them. And the business was successful, and we ended up selling it and doing okay. But again, I think the complexity and the time length of it was longer than we had thought. And again, I would hesitate to jump into something knowing that complexity that exists now. The lack of control to a certain extent in the sales cycle on that follow on through the brokers and stuff. When you don't have control over it, it's difficult, to really plan and do those kind of things. So.
Yeah. So it sounds like the lessons learned are find something that's a lot less complex and much more linear.
Simpler, in terms of... where you can control the channels and have better alignment in the channels. I mean, again, I'm trying to be careful because different people have different motivations. I don't want to speak badly about anyone within the sales cycle or channel, but there's just different motivations there, right? And we were too removed from that end user that saw the most value. That in essence is probably the problem. So as you have to go through these different gates or checkpoints, it kind of dilutes your ability to really make it fly.
I might be testing your memory a little bit on this one. So I'll try. I am, just let me know. If you think back to as you were building sales and figuring all that out, what was the profile or what were the assumptions that you were making in terms of the kinds of reps that you needed to hire? And then when you started hiring, did you then change as you grew and said, okay, well, now here's what we thought we needed, or here's what we used to think we needed. Now we need a different kind of rep.
Yeah. So I have, I guess my feeling on this one, especially in something newer, and this has kind of stayed with me, is when we initially hired, we were more trying to tie into specific experience that maybe tied into what we were doing. Mm-hmm. And I actually don't think that was the best formula to use. We kind of pivoted more, and I do it now here at Augmedix too, is I'm looking for just super motivated, super smart, super collaborative individuals. Because if you have those three elements, you're going to make stuff happen. and you can kind of learn some of the nuances and those kind of things that you need to do things. And if you have a value proposition that resonates, someone who has those qualities is going to be able to get in front of people and articulate it. I sometimes find that people who are too deep or experienced, they've just been doing it for too long. Just sometimes if they run into something, complexity or those walls, they don't necessarily have that, desire to knock down that wall and make it happen. And again, it's no fault of them, is they have rich experience and they can probably find an opportunity where there aren't those walls. But if you're trying to establish a new concept or really get a new idea out there, you need that slightly different profile. You need someone who's just really hungry. And if they're smart, they'll figure it out. And then they got to be a team player, because that's the other thing too, is you're constantly learning and you're figuring things out. You don't have the perfect formula. Maybe you're trying to figure out your incentive compensation or targeting or territories or whatever it is, and things can be fluid, and you need people who are willing to kind of ride with that and help you figure it out, bring feedback and help you improve. Because I certainly know I don't have all the answers. I didn't then, I still don't. So you want that team where everyone at every level within the organization is helping kind of contribute to making us better.
One of the things I wrote down there when you were talking about, motivated, smart, and collaborative, and having people that aren't necessarily so entrenched in a particular industry or vertical, so to speak, is fresh perspective. Because somebody has a fresh perspective, that childlike mind is turned on, and now it's not, even if it's their nature isn't to want to run through a wall, but they're just so curious about figuring it out because they have that fresh perspective that they'll be more apt to do that, right?
You may have said it better than I did, Jay. I actually like that sense of curiosity. I think is a good way to say it. Yeah, you want to figure it out, and you want to get after it, and explore it, and that's where success comes.
How do you enable that? You mentioned a little bit earlier, as it pertains to the sales process, there is data-driven, right? Data-driven value proposition. How do you enable that in your reps, I guess, or even your managers, reps throughout the entire organization, so that every customer, during the prospect or customer, whatever, that they're focused on bringing them a data-driven value proposition, where the customer is ultimately deciding, this is what you're putting in front of me, Jonathan, is something that I'm curious about and will strongly consider buying.
So let me just make sure you're asking, how do I make sure that they're armed with
like how do you
conversation?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think maybe I'll pivot a little bit, if that's all right, to what we're doing at Augmedix, because I think it's pretty telling. We help clinicians and those parent organizations, health systems, right, or large physician groups, solve that documentation burden that exists. As the EHR came into, clinicians have to spend hours and hours a day typing and entering data into the EHR, and that's in essence what we solve. So, early on, when I first got to Augmedix, what I was seeing is that the conversations were really happening about, well, let's just make the clinicians happier. There's this concept lots of people hear about, physician burnout. It's real and it's happening. And that was kind of the basis for the conversations. But the problem with that is that it was kind of a qualitative conversation. Everybody knew it was real, and it resonated to a certain extent, but it was hard to get really deep or broad within an organization on something like that. Because as you get to more decision makers within an organization, maybe the CFO that's going to look at the numbers and want to, like, is there an ROI in this? Or someone who heads the physician group, are we seeing more patients? Those metrics that matter to them. That's what we had to get to. So literally what we had to step back internally first before going to the salespeople was to be able to figure out, how do we model all that out? Like, how do we actually have a clear understanding of the difference we can make within an organization beyond just this qualitative sense of that we make doctors' lives better. So we had to get data. I mean, to put it simply, right? we had asked many of our partners that we had, or new partners, like, hey, will you share data with us? Can we actually look at all your clinicians? And this is what we do today. We actually analyze how much time they're spending in the EHR. We look at how productive they are, and we basically plot them. So we can now go into an organization and we can, that's a tool that we created for the salespeople, that they can go in, ask the question. If you're talking to a CFO, like, what are you trying to figure out? Or if you're talking, whoever the leader is, what challenge are you trying to fix? And then we have right there tools that they can leverage to be able to have that conversation to show that direct return.
Got it.
Does that make, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm being a little verbose here.
No, that was just, no, I was just about to say, I didn't want to cut you off there. No, that's perfect. And so when you say plot them, because immediately I thought of, the graph, right? The X, Y axis. Is that what you're talking about in terms of?
Yeah, basically it's a 2x2 matrix. On one side, you have productivity, and there are benchmarks out there that basically will rank doctors by their specialty on how they're performing, right? From low to high. And then on this axis, we actually created our own benchmark around EHR productivity, because that's the world we live in, right? So you have a 2x2 matrix, and you plot them, and what we discovered is direct correlation that exists. So there's a line basically from the bottom left towards the top right, and there's typically a distribution of doctors that kind of follow that line. And more of them are clustered kind of towards the middle bottom left, because there's very few that have really figured it out, right? So that's what we go on. We say is like, look, we're going to solve this. We're going to solve this EHR problem. We're going to move them up this matrix for you. And what it's going to allow you to do is it's allow your doctors to see more patients. When they see more patients, there's an increase in revenue because, they obviously bill when they see patients. So you as a health system are going to make more money. In very simple terms, that it. And then you also have the benefit, back to where I started all this, is your clinicians will be much happier because they're not spending time. They're doing what they're trained and like to do. They're trained to see patients, and that's where they're spending their time. So it's really a win-win. I use an analogy sometimes, sorry to keep going, but it's kind of like if you had a judge, who's presiding over a trial, they have a stenographer right there. We're kind of asking doctor, if we asked a judge, like, you don't have a stenographer, you got to take notes of the entire trial while you're trying to preside over it. That's what we ask doctors to do, which is crazy.
Yeah, I would not. That if I found out that I needed to do that and I was in medical school, I'd figure out something else.
Yeah,
immediately.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's a lot. Which is why when I walk into my doctor's office and all he's doing is typing on his laptop as we're talking. So I capitalize that in my intro, because I'm like, that's right. When I go and see my doctor, he spends most of the time, more time on his laptop than he does actually examining me.
It's unfortunate, and it's just the nature, and it was all done for the right reasons, right? Electronic records can be really powerful and helpful. So that in itself is a really, really good thing. It's just the way it's been rolled out, unfortunately, puts this burden on the doctors, which is less than optimal.
Yeah, which is what we're all talking about right now, which is data, right? Obviously you use data to sell. They're using data for, better healthcare and better decisions and all that stuff. Taking it a little bit deeper, as we talked about the data value driven or data-driven value proposition. When you are growing a sales team, and we can talk about it at Augmedix, and you have direct reports and then an organization of salespeople that are rolling up to them, how do you go about coaching your leaders and making sure that what needs to be executed by the sales team is executed? Like, what's your approach to leadership, coaching, and training, I guess, as a whole?
Yeah. So I guess it kind of steps back to the vision of kind of the organization itself. When I first got there is that, what, and it depends on the stage of the company, but at least where we are is, right, the worst thing to be as a sales leader is to be in this position where you have uncertainty in terms of, right, the expectations of what you're going to be able to deliver.
Yes.
Because there's, I never want to be in a place where it's like, here's your number, go get it. And it's like, it's not based on anything, right? So like, it all starts for me is building that foundation across the different roles. So I have accountability for new sales, for marketing, for existing clients, which is both expansion and retention, kind of revenue operations and strategy group. So each piece of these, right, I think holds a critical piece to building that foundation. So I'm not thinking, hopefully I'm not thinking about, am I going to get to my number this month or this quarter? I'm thinking further out. It's like the train's running, I have confidence, and I'm trying to figure out, well, how are we going to get to that next one that we have to make happen? So, where it starts is that each leader within each functional area we're working together to build that foundation within whatever their area is. So if it's in marketing, like, and for us, lead generation is a key piece of that. So have we built the right engine and the right foundation, so we're confident that that team and my leader, that she's going to be delivering on those goals. And the only way that's going to happen is if she's confident, like, hey, we have the engine that's cranking that out, and then they're continuing to optimize it. So I want them focused on building that foundation. So we have confidence that we can hit the numbers, that we need to hit each month. And that's across each area. So, whether it's the leader on the team that runs my client team, same thing. Are they building the right tools and processes and leveraging the right technologies and those to be confident that we're going to make that happen? Again, I don't know if I answered your question, Jay, but hopefully that's of interest.
No, it is, and it just spawns more questions, which means it was a great answer. So the next question I have there is how do you build that confidence? Like, how do you go about building that confidence in? Well, first of all, how does the company, when you first came on board Augmedix, you were like, because at certain points there's always a leap of faith, right? So what gave you confidence that, yep, this is the right choice, and their vision for where they want me to take this company over the next 3 to 5 years aligns with what I think I can do, right? I'm confident that I can do that. And how do you get that confidence to permeate through your leadership and down to the organization?
Yeah. All right. There were a few different parts there. I'll try to hit them. So
I got to stop stacking questions.
No, that's all right. And if I missed any, just come back to it. So, I think it started with just joining Augmedix, and yes, there was a little bit of a leap, but I always look at it as, why I joined it it was, obviously the people, you got to believe in the people you're going to be working with for those kind of things. And then the company was at a really fascinating stage for me. So it had kind of gone through some rapid growth, kind of hit a little bit of a challenge in terms of just, it kind of got ahead of itself in terms of spending those things. So it kind of, resized a little bit, and right-sized, and then now we were trying to poise to go again. But what I saw when I was asked to come in and help lead this kind of effort of now growing is I saw a solution that the market loved. So that's the first piece. And if you have that, you're a long way. That goes back to my experience at Bennu, where that was really hard to develop and build for, right? But here's a company, as I went out and talked to some customers who are using it, they loved it. So, credit to the people who founded the company and built it to where it was, is they created a solution that solved a big problem, and it was, the value and experience they were getting was really, really valuable. Now the challenge is they hadn't figured out how to properly scale the company. And that's what got me excited to hear there's market fit, and now can I come in and help scale it? And there really wasn't much of a team that I inherited because so much change had taken place. So that's what got me excited is that I could build a team with a vision that I thought would set us up for long-term success, versus inheriting a lot of things. And because sometimes it's easier to build from a clean slate than it is to try to, like a remodel, trying to work around an existing foundation, maybe if the foundation isn't great. So that's why I decided to jump on, and I'm really happy with that decision because it's been a great experience to build it.
Did you speaking of resize, did you have to at all reset expectations? In other words, where they had a set of expectations in terms of growth let's say within your first year or something like that, and you looked and you said, wait, hold on, let's start over.
That was it, as in anything. It was a little bit of a battle, I would say, constructive one, right? As we didn't want to slow down but I didn't feel confident yet in terms of what we could deliver because I didn't have a line of sight, right? I didn't have the team, I didn't have the foundation built for those things to have confidence. So then it's just, you're just trying to make things happen. And that's not a great position to be in. But the good news is there was a willingness to invest in building the right foundation. So, it took time. So trying to still deliver while you're building that foundation, yeah, that was challenging, but didn't lose sight on where we needed to be. And I think, again, put together a strong team with the right processes and tools and those kind of things where we're executing now. And there's, I mean, it never stops, right?
Right.
There's still so far to go. We're nowhere near done or where we need to be, but it's been a fun process.
Well, that's the fun part too, as well, because it never stops, right? You're always, it goes back to that curiosity thing, right? Yeah, it's
absolutely.
like that figuring it out. Like I know that. So a couple of questions that I have there as you mentioned. So actually, even before I do that, as you started building the team, how did you go about, as you were recruiting and hiring them, instilling the confidence that you obviously sought when you joined, and then how do you continually instill that confidence, right? Like, what are the conversations like? Are they data driven? Like, here's where we are, here's where we need to be, and
So they're definitely data driven. I mean, again, I go back to that same message I already conveyed of the people. It's like, look, guys, we have an unbelievable opportunity here. We have an organization that's delivering a great solution to the market. It's one that's needed, and it's fun to be able to go in and have a conversation with someone and solve something that really frustrates them. Again, going back to my previous business, it was always hard to explain what exactly you're doing here, but here it's like people get it right away, and that's cool. And that, I think, gets people excited if they can quickly grasp what you're trying to do. And then it's starting to show that vision of, okay, here's where we are, and here's how we're going to take it to that next level. I don't want to go too much off on a tangent, but another example I give is, we have some very, very large health system clients. And when I joined, it was super interesting to see, like, we had the users who used it loved it, but we had really narrow penetration. And I couldn't figure out why that was. It's like, if you love it, why aren't you using it more? And it went back to is how they were using it. They were simply giving it to their high performing doctors to keep them happy. Right. So it was, and there's not a huge number of those, but they were giving it to them. And so they're kind of like, well, everyone who's eligible for it has it. I'm like, that can't be right. So one of the neat things was, again, to take that data, that matrix I talked about, and be able to go back to them and say, look at all these clinicians we can actually help and actually deliver you more value than we're delivering today. So when you can share that vision with the team and they can see like how we can get from where we are and the amount of potential there is both within our existing client base and with new organizations, I think, it's easy for them to connect the dots and get excited about that.
Yep. That makes sense. You mentioned as the CRO that you're not just looking short term, but longer term, catching that next train, I guess, so to speak. How far out are you looking typically?
Yeah, so it's kind of been evolving, right? Because early on it was just blocking and tackling, trying to get stuff. I couldn't look that far out. And I think as we're building a better team and a better engine, it's easier to look farther out. So it's kind of been moving out as I've been going. I mean, I'm only, it was 2 years back in April. So coming on 2.5 years or so. So just getting to the point, it's where I can look further out. Right now I'm looking strongly at 2022 and trying to figure, making sure we're in place to be able to deliver on our goals for next year. But I'd like to be able to even look further out potentially and just making sure we're even, because certain things take development, right? So as I'm seeing, my team has the closest connection to the market and the needs and those kind of things, and to be able to create that feedback loop back to our product team and those kind of things in terms of where we need to be thinking. I want to get better at that so we can get a longer lead time in terms of being ahead of the market, instead of being reactive to it.
how do you prioritize that decision making in that initiative, in those initiatives? Because obviously, if looking at say 2022
Yeah.
and beyond, let's just say, and there are certain things that you want to execute and get done, how do you know? How do you prioritize? Okay, this is something that I need to start today, so that by this time in 2022, it will be there. Like, what's your decision making process there?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I wish I had a formula. It's a little bit, it kind of depends a little bit. Again, I kind of think of it is if I have confidence in what we're executing today, it allows me the luxury of looking further out. And I almost feel like we're just getting to that point. So I haven't quite had the, I don't know if you want to call it luxury or whatever, being able to look further out. I mean, it's really just starting to come together now. At the end of the day, it comes down to, right, the ability to deliver on the, those numbers as an organization that we want to hit. And that's kind of a multifaceted conversation. It's not just me, right? It's the entire leadership team. We're trying to figure out, where we're taking the company and what our expectations are and those kind of things. And that drives some of it as well. Again, I don't know if I quite hit the answer there on that one, Jay, but it's evolving, I guess, a little bit.
And that's why I asked that question, frankly, because it's one of those things where it's always, frankly, a challenge for me, which is why I love having this podcast, so I can ask smart people like you. So because I feel like it's difficult to prioritize the initiatives that you have, and I just wonder like how to go about doing that. And what you just said in your answer, it sounds to me like it resonates with a lot of the people that I talk to, which is that there's really no easy answer for that. It's never really that clear.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny too. That's why I love these conversations, is because, I mean, that's the one thing I do know, is that there's a lot I don't know. And, I need to continue to talk to people. And I love it when I get questions like that, whether it's from you or people on my team or from our CEO, like, hey, what are we doing about this? Have you thought about this? And it's like, yeah, I haven't. I better, so it's good to, I guess that's just another maybe kind of thought for I think about it, is it's good to have people around you or surround yourself, whether it's internally or externally, people who are going to ask questions that maybe you haven't spent enough time thinking about, to pull yourself out of the day to day, just so you do get that wider picture.
That was going to be my next question, which is how do you learn? In other words, where do you go to seek counsel, to seek advice, to sort of continue to grow your skill set? Because people always take for granted that Jonathan Hawkins, knows everything at this point. And, there are so many people that are listening to this podcast that take that for granted. You're the CRO, the answers to everything.
Yeah.
How do you go about it?
Yeah. I mean, I think, first of all, I don't think anyone knows all the answers. I mean, right. It's just, I don't think you ever want to stop learning and trying to get better. So, first of all, I do try to encourage an environment internally where we are willing to kind of challenge each other and think about things. So, I want to have a team that, I have members on my team who I can have open conversations about. I don't pretend to know all the answers, because so a lot of good things happen internally. And I do know a lot of people who aren't necessarily comfortable with that. They want to keep this persona of knowing everything. I don't think that does anyone any favors, to take that approach. And then externally, it's, I have a network of friends, colleagues, those kind of things that I, constantly just kind of checking in with, and we, whether it's on the phone, or it's harder to do now, meet for lunch or whatever, we're people who are, who I respect and know, and we kind of just banter back and forth on challenges that we're each facing, and talk things through. That's always really, really helpful too. It's important to have a network of folks who you trust and believe, kind of trust their counsel that you can talk to.
Yeah, for sure. Which is how you and I got in touch with.
Which is and that's why I was super excited to do this again. It's new experience, new people. I figured I'd walk out of this learning something as well. So
Absolutely. Well, I have this segment that I used to call the rapid fire five,
All right.
but now I know better. I'm calling it the final five now because some of these questions aren't necessarily short answers. And the last one that I published a couple of weeks ago, I realized that I go, wait a minute, hold on. I'm like, I can't call this rapid fire five because speaking of curiosity, somebody starts answering a question, I'm holding myself back not to follow up on what they just answered. So I'm like, it can't be rapid fire if I'm just going. If I don't go to the next question, it's not rapid fire. And then also it gives you time to sort of give some thought if you want. So, all right, sure. You ready for the inaugural final five questions?
Final five. Let's do it.
Here we go. Do you have a philosophy or approach to how you prioritize your time?
Do I have a philosophy on how I prioritize my time? Yes, I guess I try to, again, balance things between just the tactical, you got to get certain things done. And I do certainly try to carve out time for, further out kind of things. And I mean, there are times where I'll literally, because the problem is now is my calendar is kind of full every day. I do try to block times. And then the other thing I do is I always do take time for myself, meaning, I think some of the best ideas come, during that morning workout or, in the evening, especially now working at home, like a lot of other people in the country, I take the dog for a walk. And it's really, really interesting that those are actually the times where things just pop into your head where you're like, I need to do this or I need to. So I think it's important to carve out time. It's not directly work related. And those are actually the times where I think ideas, approaches, those kind of things come to you that can be super valuable.
So happy. I'm so glad to hear you say that because I'm the same way. When I walk my dog, when I'm driving, when I'm doing something else, that right brain sort of, it's almost like it subconsciously just kicks in and it's like, that's it, and you have that breakthrough and you're not, and I don't think I've had any breakthrough sitting in front of my laptop,
You don't. I'm actually the whole Zoom culture, I think, is tiring. Because staring at it's just not, I'm enjoying this, talking to you now, but right, like staring hour after hour on the screen, it's not overly healthy either. So there's times too where I like to see the team and talk to them, but there are times where I'll just say, all right, everyone, just grab your phone and let's just, people are go sit outside and let's talk. Just try to break the routine a little bit. Because I think that's where good things happen too. If you just, approach things a little bit differently. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Okay, tell me about a setback and how you overcame it.
A setback. Yeah.
This is why it's not called the rapid fire five anymore. Yeah. This is the question.
Gosh, I've had lots of setbacks. I'm trying to think of something that would be of interest to the audience.
It's all of interest. It's human interest.
Human interest. Yeah, we go back to the conversation we were talking about Benyu. That was a super interesting, rich learning experience that had really high highs and kind of low lows. And in the end, we didn't end up selling the business, and it ended up, successful. But there were times where I think we maybe didn't make the right decisions. That was lessons learned. Maybe a little bit of hubris where you think you're on to something and someone approaches you with something and, hindsight's 2020, but, I think listening maybe more to some outside counsel on certain things that maybe, would have helped. I don't know if that again addresses your exact question.
No, it does. It does. So looking back at that, and as you think about that, obviously at the end of the day, you were able to sell the company. It was a success. How did you overcome those sort of challenges in that particular setback? What did you, once you realized, oh, wait a minute, maybe we should have listened, where we didn't?
I think it's a mentality of mindset. You just have to keep going. At the end of the day, whether it's in professional or personal or whatever, right? Things don't always go exactly how you want them to go. And You know, I think also it's a good practice to step back when everything happens. Don't react too quickly. Because it's kind of true, the next day things will look different. So don't do anything hasty either. If you have like a true setback and you're like, oh my God, the sky probably isn't falling. It's just, you got to just regroup and get after it. Yeah.
I say that when things are good too. Sometimes don't do anything hasty. Don't do anything stupid.
Totally.
Speaking of hubris, right? It's like, yeah.
That's when I kind of say, like, oh no, like things are going too smoothly here. What's coming? Like, look around. Yeah, right. I think it's a good exercise just to be relatively even keel, and just take the good, enjoy it, but don't get complacent. And when things are going wrong, just if you kind of got to believe you have the right plan and those kind of things, just keep executing.
How do you manage stress or prevent it from overcoming you and getting overwhelming?
Exercise, finding something you enjoy. That's kind of my routine. I'm up every morning and I'm doing something just to get out, get fresh air. Riding the Peloton, going for a bike ride. Got a little bit into yoga. That's maybe a little bit with old age. It helps. A lot more variety, but just doing something that gives you a chance just to escape, I think really, really helps.
I've gotten to yoga a lot over the last 3 years. I'd probably do it 3 or 4 times a week, at a studio. I love it. Yoga, meditation, and walking. Those are my new 3 activities, actually. So
it's just super important. You got to carve out a little bit of time for those things. And again, as we were talking about earlier, I think the reality is that oftentimes it will help whatever's going on, maybe with your work or personal, because you start thinking about, you have a clear mind to maybe, address some of those things, that you're challenged with.
That's right. Yep. That's right. What do you want to get better at right now?
So that's kind of a funny one. I don't know. It's probably a coastal thing in the US, but when COVID hit, my oldest son, my middle child, he got really into surfing.
Okay.
So we started going a lot together, and it's pretty funny. He got really good really quickly. As a 16-year-old, and I still I'm getting better, but struggle with it. But so I'd like to get better just to be able to continue to enjoy it with him. And those are just one of the things. It's pretty cool, right? Just being out there, 2 of you, and we're lucky being here in California. It's accessible.
Yes. Now he can teach you.
Oh, he does, and that's been the really cool thing, because I think as a dad, there's so many things you teach your kids constantly doing it. It was one of those moments where he was like, the tables were turned a little bit. He's, all right, Dad, you got do this, do that. All right, this is one for you, that kind of stuff.
I'm not so proud to say, speaking of water activity, I'm not so proud to say that my 8-year-old daughter was recently trying to teach me how to tread water, because I'm definitely afraid of water. Generally speaking, I learned how to swim when I was 35. I'm 46 now. Yeah. So okay. I took lessons as a 35. I went down to the local YMCA and found one of the instructors and said, can you teach me privately how to swim? And so from day one, my kids have been, swimming, I think since like 6 months, 8 months old. And so we were on the Jersey Shore a week or so ago, and we were those waves aren't necessarily as big as the waves that you're experiencing over there, but certainly bigger than they are here in Boston off of the Cape, And so I'm afraid. I'm like, oh man, like just be careful with my kids, like 8-year-old and 6-year-old. They're out there and they're just loving it, and I'm like, you got to have mommy go out there, because I don't want to go out there.
That's not for me. I think that's so cool though. You did that. And you're doing it now. Yeah. Right? It's literally a big leap to try to do something like that later in life. So congratulations on
thank you
making that happen. Yeah. And you'll enjoy it with your kids, because that's one thing most kids love is water.
Yes.
So those are fun times.
was the first time since I was a little child that I went out, like pretty much in my chest, because my mother used to carry me out there, and I was out there with them on the Jersey Shore. Because by the end of the week, I got brave enough to go out there, and I
Yeah.
was, under the waves and all that stuff. So I was like, wow, I'm
Hey,
actually doing this. So it was pretty
that's
cool.
great.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. One last question,
Sure.
which is, what are you most excited about right now, both personally and professionally?
On the personal front, I've got 3 kids. Actually, I have 3 kids in high school. I guess it's such a fascinating time, for anyone who's had kids, but they're all starting to turn into young adults. So I don't know. It's really neat to see as their kind of adult personalities are coming together, and they're trying to figure out what they want to do next, and obviously a little bit of pressure and how they're dealing with everything. So I don't know. It's a fun time. It's a little bit stressful, but it's a really, really fun time to be a parent, and for my wife and I to kind of see how they're navigating through this, and they're getting ready to embark out there. So it's really
Amazing.
Cool. Yeah.
That's amazing.
On the professional front, I'm excited to keep doing what I'm doing. I mean, again, I kind of feel like, it's kind of a rough estimate, but we've built a good foundation. There's still a lot more to do. And now it's like, where can we take it from there? So I love the team we built and kind of what we're doing. So I'm just excited to see, can we keep the trajectory we're on, and hopefully change the trajectory even a better one. Time will tell that, but I'm excited just to keep doing that.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
How can folks reach out to you to say thank you or ask a question? Perhaps maybe I didn't ask, they wanted me to ask, or perhaps maybe even apply to join your team and help you build what you're building over there.
Yeah. They can email me. Probably would be best. Just Jon, Jon at Augmedix.com.
Jon at Augmedix.com. Jon Hawkins, thank you for going over quota. Yeah, Jay, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Goodbye, everybody. I'm cueing the music.